We're ranking all of the position groups in the AFC South today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
Joe, it's not Friday as we record this, but it is Friday here on the show. But I wanted to wish you a very happy Moana 2 trailer release day to you here on this Wednesday as we record for Friday.
Wait, Moana 2. So is this okay? I know that there's a
live action one.
That's not this with The Rock.
There's an animated sequel to Moana that's going to be coming out, and they just dropped the Rock just dropped the trailer an hour ago.
The Rock just dropped the trailer an hour ago?
Yeah. The Rock.
Oh, because he's the voice. He's the voice.
He's the voice of Maui.
They got Maui, yeah. Okay, I'm excited. Moana, one of the better children's movies I've watched. Since getting back in the game, of watching kids movies.
January 1st. I've watched about 20 times.
I'm excited to hear that, Kyle.
Happy Moana 2 trailer release day to you here on the AFC South tier maker Friday, even though it's Wednesday, here on Locked On NFL Scout.
We can all unite over the excitement for Moana 2. But that's probably
One more thing. Happy post-June 1st cap eve to you as well, because I just did that math in my head. And some teams are going to be getting some cap space this weekend.
Maybe our teams. Maybe our teams. Excited to sign the draft class. That's what I'm excited to do.
Get my rookies under contract.
Get the rookies under contract and have flexibility for during the season. That's honestly what I think the Bills should do. But go listen to Locked On Bills. Did a full podcast on that. You can check it out.
Great.
Now, what are the Dolphins doing? What's the thing? If you're trading for John Allen? I don't want to hear about it.
Probably Greg Van Roten, at guard.
Yeah.
Probably a third safety type. And if I were them, I'd probably sit on the rest of it. You're going to need some carryover cap. You're going to need some in-season flexibility. You need to budget about, $5 million for practice squad players throughout the course of the season.
Yep.
Since they opened up there's now a higher pay for your vet or your tenured guys versus your non-tenured guys. So that all gets kind of dicey.
Yeah.
So I'd hang on to it.
Cool. AFC South fans, it's time to piss you off. We are going through. We have ranked all of the position groups, the quarterback, skill players, offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, and secondary. And we are going to share with you today how we stack them up through our very consistent grading process, where we have assessed every player on the roster, given them a grade based on what bucket of caliber of player that they are. And here we go. We're going to let you know who's got the best of the best.
You didn't tell me I had the browser all messed up.
Well, Kyle,
if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the visual aid as this unfolds.
Yeah.
Do not screenshot and out of context. If you like or dislike the conversation, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, or alternatively, share the show. We did this the first time. We had somebody who kind of snatched a screenshot outside of context. This is not a all-encompassing, right? Yeah. It's a large piece of the pie, but it doesn't factor in different schemes and personnel usages and coaching staffs and all that stuff.
So great job, fans of the NFC West. You guys cooperated. So
thank you. Yeah, we didn't see any no context screenshots.
At least they didn't tag us in it. Right.
Right. Let's see what the AFC South has in store, shall we?
Yep.
We're going to start with quarterbacks. They are standalone. Obviously, it's such a big piece of individual team successes is the quarterbacks. And I think you look at the South and you have two kind of mini tiers within it as far as guys that have proven a certain stratosphere of play or at least a minimum threshold of play. And then other guys that are limited sample size, second-year players. So the obvious two at the top here is Jacksonville's Trevor Lawrence and Houston CJ Stroud. And you and I are both of the opinion that if we had to start with one of these guys now, CJ Stroud, with the season that he had, is such a strong exclamation point on his potential that we would both choose CJ Stroud to be the first AFC South quarterback off the board if we were picking them.
Yeah, I think obviously Trevor Lawrence has a little bit of experience on him and time will tell, but right now I think it just comes down to this. Who would you rather have? I'd pick CJ Stroud.
If you feel like they're close, just remember one of them is 2 years ahead of the other, right? And that for me, it makes it very simple.
Yeah.
Like I think there's some compelling discussion points on both guys and the things that they do well to kind of compare and contrast them. But one guy's going into his fourth year, another guy's going into his second year. And that's the deciding factor for me because now you're projecting ceilings and growth.
The next thing that we have to decide is who is 3 and 4 between Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, who we have very small sample sizes of, both unbelievable in terms of physical upside.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been thinking about this ever since I knew we had to do this. And I have an answer here for you. I am going with Anthony Richardson over Will Levis. And the reason is I feel a lot better about Anthony Richardson in Shane Steichen's offense, where I think that it will be more adaptable to his skill set versus Will Levis going into a West Coast timing-based precision passing offense. That's how I would separate the two.
Okay. I'm not going to argue with you there. So we have the quarterbacks, Houston, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Tennessee. And the rest of these conversations are a lot simpler.
Yeah.
Right? Because with quarterbacks, we score them differently because of how important they are to a team's overall picture. For all the other ones, we can simply say, look, here's the total aggregate score for the skill groups, which is what we're going to do next here, and go all the way down the line and just say, here's how they scored and why they scored the way that they did.
Shall we?
Let's get it started. Yeah.
Okay.
And the best skill group, which comprises your top 3 wide receivers, your top 2 tight end options, and your top 2 running back options. The Houston Texans, with the addition of Stefon Diggs. They just paid Nico Collins, yesterday?
Yep.
On a contract that I think is going to age very gracefully for them.
Yeah.
It's effectively a 4-year, $75 million contract when you add the 3 years for 72 up to 75 value, but just the raw value, that's great for them. They bring back Dalton Schultz. They acquire Joe Mixon, kind of a well-rounded group. They've got some growth and upside with Tank Dell at wide receiver. So that's a pretty complete group, and they're very well represented as a result. But they just barely eked out another team, Joe.
Yeah, Tennessee Titans coming in at number 2, and 11 personnel offense where you're going to put Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tyler Boyd on the field. That looks really good. We're high on Chig Okonkwo, young tight end who's done a lot in 2 years as a raw player in an unstable environment. And then really good looking backfield tandem of Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard. So there's a lot to like there. I think this is a pretty healthy division in terms of skill players overall. But you have a nice concentration of talent in both Houston and Tennessee to kind of be the class of this division, in my opinion.
Do you want to do the back half or you want to save it?
That's a good tease, Kyle Crabbs. We'll get to the back half of the
love a good tease
skill players and then the trenches. There's a team that's going to be real excited about where they land in the trenches So be sure to stick with us. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
I can't wait to watch this Moana trailer.
I can tell. I feel like you were trying to watch it during that ad read, and you.
No comment.
Yeah, you're surprised. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Kyle Crabbs is looking for the mouse. He's got to click the button. There's one job.
Third place in the South as it pertains to the skill groups. We have Houston 1, Tennessee 2. We have Jacksonville at 3. And Jacksonville, between Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne, acquiring Brian Thomas Jr. at wide receiver. It's at least a little bit of a question there, but Christian Kirk's back healthy. So you have at least a quality starter in every one of the buckets, right? But I think some of the depth behind it, as far as whether it's Dearness Johnson, or it seems like they really like Tank Bigsby, but we don't really know with Tank Bigsby at all. Brenton Strange obviously was an early investment for them, but that's still very early for him to get a feel for where he's going to ultimately end up landing. Brian Thomas hasn't played at all. And then Gabe Davis is a player that you and I both think is kind of a skill-specific type of player. Just the totality of it is not as deep and complete, or it could be, but at least we don't know right now. And that's why Jacksonville kind of stacks where they do.
Yeah. Which means the Colts come in at number 4. And I think there's a lot to like with Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Jonathan Taylor. But I think beyond that, you have questions. We don't know how good A.D. Mitchell is. We don't know what Jelani Woods is going to look like after not playing last year with a hamstring. And, flashing as a rookie, but not even that much in terms of overall volume of snaps played. Love Jonathan Taylor. Don't love your depth, right? There's just a little bit more in terms of questions with Indianapolis. And so they bring up the rear here in the AFC South.
For sure. But assuming you guys didn't hang up and stop listening.
Yeah, here's your moment, Indy.
Oh, yeah. Here's your time in the sun. The Indianapolis Colts have 4 players graded as quality starters or better on our offensive line grading. That is going to be a first-class ticket to a top 5 offensive line in the league.
Surely, yeah.
Just kind of reading between the lines, and get it, pun intended, reading between the lines.
Yeah,
the offensive line. Yeah. But kind of projecting forward, and look, we've done almost half the league at this point. Next week we'll be through half the league. This is a very, very strong score. And there's a little bit of intrigue and mystery as far as the rookies and their role as swing tackles and utility interior players and how good they're ultimately going to end up being. But when you have 4 out of 5 guys that are quality starter plus, that just puts you in a certain strategy. Like, teams don't have that collection of talent that's the top tiers of talent. And the Colts do. And by a very healthy margin, they are sitting here as our comfortable first-place offensive line team.
Number 2, the Houston Texans, franchise cornerstone player, and Laramie Tunsil. Heck of a player there. And then you love Shaq Mason at right guard. Titus Howard's been a good player at right tackle, assuming he can be healthy. I think your question marks come with Kenyon Green, or whatever the plan is, at left guard, and then Drew Scruggs / Jarrett Patterson at center. And the good news about that is, where you look for developmental upside, it is in those 2 spots. We just need to learn more about what those players can do. So I think you have a path to close some ground on Indy, but let's be honest, you don't have the collection of talent that Indy does. You're still number 2, still a good offensive line, relatively speaking, but the bar's so high in this division with Indy that second place ain't a bad spot to be.
Yeah, if Kenyon Green and Drew Scruggs both come out this year and play like quality starters plus, then maybe you close some ground in Indianapolis, right?
Yeah.
But It's a high bar and a high leap that would need to happen in 1 year. Also, Blake Fisher, the day 2 tackle there, is a nice kind of upside play for them as well.
You're looking for ceiling. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, the third place team here in the South from an offensive line standpoint is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their investment in Mitch Morse at center to go along with last year's first-round pick in Cam Robinson.
Anton Harrison, you mean?
Who did I say?
Cam Robinson.
Yeah, last year's first-round pick, and then Cam Robinson not starting the season on the suspension list. I was merging 2 talking points into one, so thank you. I think them bringing back Ezra Cleveland after acquiring him at the trade deadline is a nice boost too. The floor is much higher. I don't know how high the ceiling is because you kind of know what Cam Robinson is. You know, Brandon Scherf's like a late stage version of himself. You know, Mitch Morse is a late stage version of himself. Anton Harrison's kind of the upside swing that they have. But maybe your ceiling, like Houston, we kind of joked, hey, maybe you could chase down the Colts. I don't think the Jaguars have that kind of talent, but their floor, especially versus what it was last year, as we alluded to when we did the Jacksonville deep dive, they should feel much better about that unit. And as we're going to get into Jacksonville here in just a minute, they have kind of their own thing that they can hang their hat on in the trenches too.
Tennessee brings up the rear with the offensive line, but I think there's a lot to be excited about with it. Given you have 2 very high recent draft picks and J.C. Latham, rookie this year, Peter Skoronski last year, there's your path to ceiling to go with an outstanding offensive line coach in Bill Callahan. Lloyd Cushenberry is a quality starter for you at center. We just need to find some answers here for the right side. And maybe that's Daniel Brunskill and Dylan Raduns. I just don't – I mean, those are probably at their best, sufficient level starters. Maybe Raduns can be even better under Callahan and less moving around. He's played 4 different spots extensively throughout his career. I think his best football has come at right tackle. So if he is the right tackle with Bill Callahan, you like the upside here. So I don't think we know enough about this group for it to justify a higher rating, but I think you can look at the youth, the skill sets, and the coaching and feel like while you may have the worst group right now, there's a lot of room for it to go.
Well, and that's why at the very top, we kind of alluded to, this doesn't include coaching. Like y'all having Callahan coaching the offensive line is with youth and moldable players.
Yeah.
The leaps are there to be had, but based off of the information that we have right now, that's how you score. And thankfully, we update this throughout the course of the entire season.
Yeah.
So if Bill Callahan parts the sea and works some miracles, and all of a sudden, all the young players, it clicks into place immediately, and Dylan Raduns becomes a level and version of himself that he has not yet, check back in October. And, there's potential, I think, for them to really make some leaps and bounds. Maybe not so much in like the upper echelons of the AFC South, but relative to the entirety of the league. I think the score that they have right now based off of our information versus how it could trend because of the upside is a totally different ball game and a conversation for them. But that's where they're at right now.
Defensive line, Colts fans, are you still here? Hope you are, because you have the best defensive line in this division.
Deep,
and it's insanely deep. I mean, you have a great group of starters with Buckner and Grover Stewart, and Kwity Paye and Samson Ebukam, who, like, wake up world, Ebukam's a stud. But for as exciting as that is, it's the depth, really, to me, that really shines with Tyquan Lewis, and Oda Yengbo out of Vanderbilt. And I mean, what you got, Laitu Latu, I thought was the best edge rusher in the class. Chris Ballard certainly does as well. Raekwon Davis is an infusion to the depth of that interior to make you more stout against the run. It's got top end talent, and it's just deep. Their defensive end room is like, they're 6 deep at defensive ends. Got to be probably the strongest in the NFL.
Yeah. Now, behind that, we mentioned Jacksonville having something to hang their hats on. And Jacksonville, with Josh Allen as a cornerstone, Travon Walker with upward mobility, I think is very important to note for Travon Walker. You like the The 1 through 3 on the defensive line, provided Devon Hamilton's kind of able to recapture his 2022
they paid him off of that
form.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was a really good player in 2022. And obviously there was some injury type stuff. It sounded like some scary injury type stuff with him. But Roy Robertson Harris, kind of a stable presence to be opposite of the new addition in Eric Armstead, like a lot of infusion of Armstead into this group, and Mason Smith is a rookie that we don't know anything about. So he doesn't get any point value yet, but I think there's a lot of growth upside in season for Jacksonville between Travon Walker and Mason Smith, in addition to what can Devon Hamilton look like versus the best version of himself. Like there's room to go up, and they're nipping on the Colts' heels in spite of all the good things we said about the Colts.
And honestly, Houston as a number 3 team here is not far behind. And there's a lot to like about this Houston defensive line with a franchise cornerstone in Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, who's knocking on the door of that. And you brought in Denico Autry, who we think the world of, and Fadakasi's a nice nose tackle. I think what really probably pushes Houston down compared to like an Indy or Jacksonville is just the depth. I feel like we need to learn more about the depth, particularly on the interior defensive line. I mean, Mario Edwards, Tim Settle, kind of a replacement level guy. We count in Derek Barnett as a quality depth player, but like, who's your 4th guy at defensive end where you're going to rotate a lot, and that guy's going to get 25-30% of the snaps. So not a bad group in Houston. I just feel like with what exists, especially with Indy and Jacksonville, you're just a tick below.
Yeah, and then depth, one of the primary issues with Tennessee, too, with how they score here. Obviously, you have one of the better interior defensive linemen in the league in Jeffrey Simmons, and Harold Landry and Arden Key's not a bad 1-2 punch on the edge.
Right.
But behind that, Devondre Sweat is a 2nd-round pick. We don't know yet. It needs to happen, and we need to see it. Rashad Weaver kind of looks like he's going to be a rotational guy, period, and a sufficient level rotational guy. But they just don't have the volume of horses as the rest. I think you could take their best 3 and hold it up against any of the other best 3 in the division and say, hey, we'll take our chances with these 3 guys, that being Harold Landry, Jeffrey Simmons, and Arden Key. And it's pretty comparable. But when you look at the full group of the rooms, that's where Tennessee, I think they're probably just another year away from really revitalizing and revamping that entire room.
Defensive back 7, linebackers, and secondary. We're going to get into all of that here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with us.
I did not attempt to watch any more of the Moana trailer during that break.
Well, thank you. I didn't have as much time this time around. Well, Kyle, linebacker is going to be fascinating. I almost feel like we have to talk about the top 3 in
one conversation.
Right. To me, it's because this is as close as it can get. So why don't you navigate us through that?
Well, all right. So 1 through 3, we have a tie for first place. And then the 3rd place team in this division is 0.03 behind being in first place. So pretty much the lay of the land here, the DNA to get here is you have a quality starter, an adequate starter, and then your 3rd linebacker is a quality depth player. And that's the book effectively on all 3 of these teams, Indianapolis, Houston, and Jacksonville. They're in that order, where Houston and Indianapolis are straight up tied. And then Jacksonville, with their 3rd linebacker being Chad Muma, who doesn't get the full point total, because like we would say, if we were going to put you in a bucket right now, we would put you in the quality depth bucket, but you're still young and need to play more. So you only get a fraction of the points. That's how Jacksonville ends up like right on the heels at 0.03 of a point out of being in first place in the division. But, and that's why we don't want you to screenshot it, because Jacksonville fan would say, y'all got us 3rd in the linebacker room. Really? We got Devin Lloyd, we got Foyeo Lacoon, we got Chad Muma as a young guy. I'd be like, yeah, you're right. You're this close to being in first place. And that's just how the scoring works. And when it's a room like linebacker, where we only score a handful of guys because of the volume of guys that traditionally play in today's game, that's kind of how we end up settling on such a tightly scored group. And then obviously that would put Tennessee in fourth.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Gibbons really impressed both of us in our research for the project. Then we just need to see it a little bit more.
He's pretty much all the points that are reflected here are Jack Gibbons.
Yeah. We don't think highly of Kenneth Murray. Like, candidly, we need to see that come together, not optimistic. And then your third guy's probably Cedric Gray, who's a rookie. So I don't think there's much of a case to be made for Tennessee to be any higher than fourth.
Just kind of looking at the tier maker, I feel like there's not any Titans fans that are left.
Hopefully they are, because here's where it gets good for them.
Here's your moment in the sun. Your first place in the secondary. With L'Jarius Sneed and Roger McCreary and Chidobe Awuzie.
Hooker.
And Amani Hooker.
Yeah.
This is a really good group. And I alluded to this when we did the Titans on Thursday, which is weird because we did that show yesterday, recorded it on Tuesday.
This is throwing you off in a big way.
Now we're recording the Wednesday show, or we're recording the Friday show on Wednesday, and the Titans show technically runs tomorrow, but we talked about it yesterday.
Right.
This defensive scheme that we're expecting that they're going to run with the coaching staff that they've tapped into, a lot of these guys are very high volume players. And if you're going to say, look, we're going to spend the premium assets on the guys that are going to touch the field the most in this defense, it is the secondary. So it's, I think, a proper allocation for what we're expecting they're going to do defensively. And it's a nice place to be able to hang your hat. And they obviously went out and signed traded for an outside corner and signed another one.
Yeah.
And remade the whole room. And I think that tells you how important it is for them to get it right.
So, Kyle, I am not remembering how we separated this tie here between Houston and Jacksonville for 2 and 3.
I think we said if you took the worst starting player out of both groups, Houston would have a better other 4 players because they actually lose points for the second outside corner. Who we have as a replacement level player right now.
Right.
So they are technically tied. So if you wanted to just, if that helps Jacksonville fans,
yeah, it makes you sleep better.
This is technically accurate too, right?
Yeah.
And then that obviously puts the Colts, which just have a lot of questions, right? A lot of incomplete evaluations in this group. Between Juju Brents, who Joe and I both really loved in the pre-draft process, played some snaps, but not a ton of snaps last year. Dallas Flowers, Nick Cross, Jalen Jones, Daniel Scott. Like these are all guys that are tabbed for pretty reasonable roles in this secondary. And we don't have a lot of body of work on any of them. And because of that, we can't really grade you with a lot of confidence. Now, if you wanted to project their ceilings, I think you could maybe forecast them into being competitive with Jacksonville and Houston. But it obviously is just so much youth that has to come together. You want to hang your hat on something right now. Julian Blackmon and Kenny Moore are 2 players that we like a lot.
Yeah. Well, in here, Colts, I mean, you got $26 million in cap space. Go sign Steven Nelson or Stephon Gilmore or Dory Jackson and or Xavier Howard. Sign one of these guys and make us feel a lot better about your situation. I think that also applies to Houston
and
Jacksonville. Like, you guys should be competing for these corners right now, because I think that's probably an issue with those teams in a big way. I think my big takeaway from this entire conversation with the AFC South is don't sleep on Indy. I think that we're talking a lot about Houston as the young darlings of the league. Jacksonville recapturing what they had in 2022 with some reinforcements. But the Colts, with all their injuries, year 1 under Shane Steichen, year 1 with all the injuries that they had at offensive line, at running back, at quarterback, on their defense, like their secondary situation was kind of a mess with what happened with Isaiah Rodgers and injuries there and like draft picks that you wind up cutting. Like, it was a super strange situation. They were like very close to hosting a playoff game last year. And so if Anthony Richardson can come in there and be the truth, and now you have, we're concerned about, is he going to be able to stay healthy and play the game in a way that's going to lend itself to durability? You got Joe Flacco now, who, I don't know, can he be at least as good as Gardner Minshew was last year with a better
quarterback?
Yeah, you know what I mean? My big takeaway from studying the AFC South this week is I'm not sleeping on the Colts.
It's probably a good takeaway to have. That is going to do it for us this week on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We hope you enjoyed the deep dive. Next week, what division?
Somewhere in the NFC. Let's decide it right now. It'll be either the North, South, or East.
Get rid of one.
North.
Okay, we're doing the NFC East next week.
All right, NFC East.
So that's what you have to look forward to. Again, you can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Make it a great weekend. We will be back again on Monday to kick things off with the Dallas Cowboys.